I turned 32, staring at a candle that wasn't meant for me. The flame trembled in the middle of the restaurant, while I pretended everything was fine. The reservation was in her name. The dessert had been pre-ordered by her. The emerald wrap dress I'd chosen had been chosen with her in mind. And the empty chair across from me felt bigger than the entire table. I'd been left before. Unanswered texts, poorly constructed excuses, promises that evaporate like rain off a summer sidewalk in Charleston. But never on my birthday. Never with a babe. Something came up, sent 22 minutes before we were supposed to meet. If you're someone who believes in unexpected beginnings, in the kind of turns you only understand in hindsight, subscribe right now before this story pulls you any further in. And I want to know something specific. What's the last risk you took that actually paid off? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Wren. I'm a brand strategist. I help small businesses figure out who they are before they try to tell the world. I live alone in a third-floor apartment in Charleston's Wagoner Terrace neighborhood, close enough to the water that I can smell the marsh on windy evenings, but not close enough to have a view. I keep color-coded calendars. I have a sticky note system that my friends make fun of and secretly wish they had. I'm the person in the group chat who sends the itinerary 3 days before the trip. I am, in short, the last person who should have been ambushed by her own birthday. That night, I was trying very hard to be my best version of myself. The restaurant was on King Street. Low lighting, reclaimed wood tables, the kind of place that smells like rosemary and ambition. I arrived 5 minutes early, because of course I did. I ordered sparkling water. I checked my phone. I checked it again. When the message came, "I'm not going to make it tonight. We'll talk soon." I stared at the screen for a long moment like it was a sentence in a language I was still hoping to mistranslate. There was nothing to translate. I could have left. I could have paid for the water and walked out with whatever dignity the situation allowed. But something kept me there. Maybe pride. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe the part of me that absolutely refuses to let a night become only about abandonment. So I took a breath and ordered an entree. The short rib, I told the approaching server, with a confidence I did not feel. If I was eating alone on my birthday, I was at least going to eat something worth talking about. That's when she appeared. The server. Not cinematically. No slow motion. No ambient lighting change. In fact, she nearly knocked over a water glass at the next table and murmured a "my bad," with a crooked smile that was far too genuine for the restaurant's curated aesthetic. Her hair was up in a bun that had clearly given up trying, a few dark strands escaping around her face. Her name tag said Saoirse, and I immediately wanted to know the story behind it. Dark eyes, unhurried, observant. Not curious in the way people are when they smell drama. Observant in the way people are when they actually pay attention. "Everything good over here?" she asked. I almost said no. I almost said, "My girlfriend just bailed on my birthday dinner and I'm sitting here alone in a dress I bought specifically for tonight, so no, not particularly." But I held it together. "All good," I said, "just celebrating solo." She tilted her head slightly, the way someone does when they hear more than you said. "Best company," she replied. I laughed. Not the automatic kind you use to end a conversation. A real one. Small, but genuine. She took my order, left, came back a few minutes later with a glass of wine I hadn't asked for, and set it down like it was obvious. "I didn't order this." "I know." I looked at the glass. "Is this a restaurant policy? Wine for women sitting alone on their birthdays?" She bit the side of her lip to keep from smiling. "Personal policy." That landed harder than it should have. It wasn't a line. It wasn't pity. It was presence. Like someone had decided, quietly and without fanfare, that I wasn't going to be invisible that night. She passed by my table more than the job required. Not intrusively, just enough. Checking in, refilling water, asking about the food with the casual ease of someone who's genuinely good at being around people. I'm used to reading brands, reading people, reading the gap between what someone presents and what they actually mean. With Saoirse, I didn't find a gap. What I saw was what was there. When the dessert arrived, a chocolate lava cake that had been part of the original reservation, it came with a candle already lit. "We can take it off if you want," Saoirse said, voice quieter now. I looked at the flame. I thought about the empty chair. I thought about the text. "No," I said. "Leave it." She stayed. Didn't sing. Didn't make a thing of it. Just stayed. And for the first time all night, I didn't feel alone. I don't know exactly when it started. The shift. Not falling for someone, not yet. Something quieter than that. Just the slow realization that abandonment doesn't have to be the last word in a night. Sometimes it's just the comma before someone decides to stay in the room. I blew out the candle and made a different kind of wish. I thought I'd go home crying. Instead, I walked out of the restaurant beside Saoirse like it had been the plan all along. She got off at 10:45. I'd waited outside on a bench, pretending to answer emails I had no intention of sending. When she came out with her jacket slung over her bag and her hair finally down, she looked at me like I was still a choice, not an afterthought. "You're still here," she said, half surprised, half pleased. "I told you I was celebrating solo. I'm just expanding the radius." She laughed, easy and unforced. Charleston at night has a way of cooperating with moments like this. Warm air, jasmine drifting from somewhere, the Battery a few blocks south with all that quiet weight of history and water. We started walking without picking a direction, and for the first time all evening, I stopped thinking about the empty chair. I told her about Declan. That was her name. My girlfriend. Declan. I said it the way you say the name of someone you're trying to decide how to feel about. Saoirse didn't interrupt, didn't wince, didn't perform sympathy, just listened. "She always had a reason," I said. "Always something important that came up. I used to joke that I was dating a fictional CEO." "Did you believe the reasons?" I thought about it longer than I should have. I preferred believing them over asking questions. It was strange to say out loud. Declan never liked photos, never wanted to show up in anything I posted. Said she valued privacy. I said I respected that. She'd avoid calling me her girlfriend around her work friends. "Labels feel limiting," she'd say, like it was enlightened. I thought I was being mature. What I was actually being was convenient. Saoirse kicked a pebble off the sidewalk. Sometimes we accept smaller versions of what we need just to not be alone. I stopped walking for a second. Not because it was unkind, because it was the opposite. "You sound like someone who's lived that." She smiled without humor. "I've been on both sides of it." That got me. She wasn't positioning herself as the good guy, wasn't playing the wise observer. She was just being honest. The way some people are when they've done enough work on themselves that honesty doesn't cost them anymore. I felt something loosen in my chest, a kind of relief I hadn't expected from a stranger. We found a bench near the water. The lights from the harbor reflected in long, quiet lines. I slipped off my heels and let my feet touch the cool pavement. Saoirse looked over at me with something like warmth in her expression. "You don't seem like someone who likes winging it," she said. "I build content strategy for a living. Winging it gives me hives. So what are you doing out here?" I thought about it, trying not to repeat a pattern. The wind off the water moved a strand of hair across her face. I, who am famously measured about physical space, had a sudden urge to brush it aside. I didn't. She noticed anyway. "You don't look devastated," she observed. "I'm functional," I said automatically. Functional isn't the same as okay. That hit somewhere. I'd been complimented on my steadiness my whole life. Nobody had ever questioned it. My phone buzzed. Declan. Before you see anything, can we talk tomorrow? You're making this bigger than it is. I looked at the screen. Saoirse didn't try to read it, just watched my expression shift. Her? She asked. I nodded. You going to respond? I breathed. I've been taking things seriously for 2 years. Maybe now I don't have to. I put the phone away without responding. Small gesture. Big shift. Saoirse leaned her shoulder against mine. Not asking, not announcing, just leaned. My whole body registered it. Not electric, warm, steady. I'm not going to tell you to forget anyone, she said. But I'm also not going to pretend you deserve to be someone's second option. I turned to look at her. We were close. Closer than strangers. So what do I deserve? She held my gaze. Someone who shows up. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was weighted in the best way. I thought about Declan telling me I was too much, too intense, too sensitive. I thought about all the times I dialed myself down to fit inside her schedule, about the candle wavering alone, and then I did something that wasn't on my calendar. I laced my fingers through hers. She held on. The harbor kept doing what harbors do. No dramatic consequence. Just water and light, and the two of us on a bench, hands connected. That was impulsive, I murmured. You needed some of that, she said. We talked for another hour. Bad dates, funny stories, the time she served a couple who spent the entire dinner arguing about the correct pronunciation of bruschetta. I told her about a client who rebranded his pet supply company and wanted the tagline to be, "For real though." She laughed until her eyes watered. I was laughing for real. And I noticed, with a kind of uncomfortable clarity, that I'd felt more present in the last 2 hours with someone I barely knew than I had in 2 years with someone I'd called mine. When we finally stood to leave, she held my hand one more second before letting go. I work tomorrow too, she said, in case you feel like expanding further. I smiled. I might. On the walk home, my phone buzzed again. Declan, you know no one else is going to love you the way I do. I stopped on the sidewalk. For the first time in 2 years, the sentence didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a threat. And that's when I understood that this night hadn't been about being left. It had been about realizing I'd already been leaving for a long time. And maybe, just maybe, someone was starting to find me. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover that had nothing to do with wine. It was clarity. And clarity, it turns out, is a lousy way to start a morning. The light through my curtains was too bright for the mood. I lay there cataloging the evidence I had been ignoring for months. Declan never once introduced me as her girlfriend at her work events. I was a friend from the neighborhood. For 2 years. She'd disappear for evenings with no real explanation and resurface with the specific energy of someone who's rehearsed their excuse. When my college friend Phoebe asked why Declan never came to anything, I said, she's an introvert. I had become a full-time PR firm for someone else's absence. My phone had 4 notifications, 3 from Declan, 1 from Saoirse. I opened Saoirse's first. Good morning, expanded birthday girl. Still standing? I smiled before I could stop myself. That annoyed me a little. It was too early for that. Standing. No planning involved. Personal best. Simple. No pressure, no agenda. Declan's messages were different. You need to stop being dramatic. I was dealing with something important. I don't appreciate being made to feel guilty for things that aren't my fault. I reread that last one several times. Made to feel guilty. I had eaten dinner alone. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't called her crying or sent a long paragraph. Somehow, in her version, I was the one creating a problem. This wasn't new. Declan was extraordinarily skilled at narrative inversion. When she forgot things, it was because I hadn't reminded her early enough. When she canceled, it was because I knew how unpredictable her schedule was. When I asked for more visible affection, she said I had an attachment issue. I had spent 2 years being the unreasonable one in situations she created. Another message came in while I sat there. Declan. We need to talk today. I don't like feeling like you're pulling away. I nearly laughed. She didn't like feeling like I was pulling away. I had spent 2 years trying to get closer to someone who was always one step ahead of me but never beside me. And now I was the distant one. I didn't respond. Instead, I worked. Reviewed campaign drafts, ran a virtual client call, moved through the day with a strange efficiency. But in every pause, my mind drifted back to small things I'd trained myself not to notice. Declan had a separate photo album on her phone, password protected, that she said was work files. She'd answer calls in the other room with a tone she reserved for people who weren't me. She had a friend group I'd never met, and when I asked about them, she'd say they wouldn't be my scene. I had never pushed. Maybe I already knew what pushing would find. That evening, without building a pros and cons list, which was, for me, a minor revolution, I walked back to King Street. Saoirse saw me through the window before I'd decided whether to go in. Her smile happened before she could arrange it. Not performative, not calculated, real. You came back, she said, leaning on the host stand. Personal policy. She laughed and tilted her head toward an open table. I sat. Didn't order wine this time. Ordered coffee. She brought it with a slice of lemon pound cake I hadn't asked for. This is going to be a problem, I said. Only if you keep coming back. I breathed. I think I let a lot slide, I said. It came out before I was ready. She didn't prompt me, just waited. She never really claimed me. I kept telling myself it was because she valued privacy. But I think it was because it was convenient not to. Saoirse was quiet for a moment. Did you claim her? That landed strange. I told everyone about her. But was she actually there? I opened my mouth and closed it again. No. She moved closer to my side of the bar, not touching me yet, just reducing the distance. You don't seem like someone who likes being kept in the dark. I don't. So why did you stay there? I'd thought about that all day. The answer wasn't flattering. Because half of someone felt safer than nobody. Saoirse extended her hand across the counter, a slow, deliberate gesture, and touched my fingers. I felt it in my whole chest. You deserve the whole person, she said. The world contracted to the size of that bar top. I leaned forward slightly. So did she. Our faces were close enough to make neutrality impossible. I could see a faint scar near her jaw. She'd tell me later it was from a childhood skateboarding incident she still considers a badge of honor. She could see that I was nervous. This is impulsive again, I whispered. Not everything that moves fast goes the wrong direction, she said. We were almost there. Almost. A bus on King Street hit a pothole with a sound like a gunshot. We both startled. She laughed first. I followed, the kind of laugh that relieves tension without erasing it. She leaned back just enough to breathe normally. I don't want to be an escape, she said, serious now. I want to be a choice. That sentence went somewhere deep, because nobody had ever offered me space like that before. Declan had always been in competition, even when she didn't show up for the contest. Saoirse was doing something different. She was just standing there, with the door open, not pushing me through it. When I left the restaurant, my phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. Declan, tagged in a photo, with another woman. Caption, perfect night. Posted at 9:47 p.m., the same time she'd told me she was dealing with something important on my birthday. I stood still on the sidewalk, phone glowing in my hand. It wasn't devastation I felt. It was the specific sensation of a puzzle piece clicking into the space where it was always supposed to go. Everything made sense now. And for the first time, the understanding came wrapped in something I hadn't expected. Relief. I didn't cry when I saw the photo. That might have been the most disorienting part. I stood on the sidewalk on King Street, the screen bright in the dark, looking at Declan's arm around a woman I'd never seen. The familiarity of that contact already telling me everything about its timeline. Perfect night. The caption felt addressed to me. Or maybe I'd just spent too long looking for messages that were never mine to read. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Declan. Before you make assumptions, it's not what you think. It was exactly what I thought. I wrote back for the first time in 2 days. Then what is it? She replied in under a minute. I was going to tell you. We hadn't been good for a while. You know that. I did know we hadn't been good. What I hadn't known was that she'd already started solving for it while still calling me hers. She asked to meet. I said yes. Not because I wanted her back. Because I needed to hear the lies in real time, with no screen softening the edges. We met at a cafe on Broad Street late the next afternoon. The light was doing something annoyingly golden and photogenic, the kind of sky that's supposed to mean something. Declan was composed, dressed like she'd prepared for this. Blazer, deliberate hair. She had the posture of someone arriving with a finished argument. "You're overreacting," was the first thing she said. Not hello. I felt something settle in me. Cold, but not cruel. Just clear. Am I? I asked. We were already fading. You know that. That photo doesn't mean what you want it to mean. Her arm was around your waist. She sighed like I'd just failed a logic puzzle. You've always been too intense. I needed something easier. There it was, the old script. Too intense. I'd heard it so many times I'd started to believe it meant something true about me rather than something strategic about her. You could have ended things before looking for easier, I said. I was trying to figure things out. While still with me, she looked away for half a second. That half second was everything. You were pulling back too, she tried. Don't act like you were all in. I almost smiled. I'd been all in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have reservations. I was asking for the minimum, I said. She leaned forward. You're going to throw away 2 years because of a picture? I thought about the candle flickering, the empty chair, every time I'd explained her absence to people who noticed, every time I'd made myself smaller so she could feel bigger. It's not the picture, I said. It's everything I pretended not to see. The quiet between us was heavy, but not for me. She shifted, tried a different angle. That server, she said, with a half smile she clearly thought would land harder. You're already moving on to make a point. I'm not making a point. Wren, nobody is going to handle you the way I have. You know that. There it was, the threat dressed up as concern. I don't want to be handled, I said. I want to be chosen. Silence. She had no response for that, for someone who always had a response. I stood up before she could try another approach. You didn't lose me tonight, I said. You lost me every time you treated my presence like a formality. I walked out before my nerve could reconsider. Outside, sitting on a bench near the fountain like she'd been there the whole time, was Saoirse. She wasn't there by accident. I'd texted her before I went in. Doing the hard thing today, might need a friendly face after. She'd replied, Say the street, I'll be there. And she was. How'd it go? She asked, standing. I took a breath. Clarifying. She studied my face the way people do when they're checking for damage they can't quite see. You're shaking a little. Adrenaline, or late-onset emotional intelligence. She laughed, and then she opened her arms. I'm not a run into someone's arms person. I'm the person who calculates whether a hug is appropriate before initiating one. But I closed the distance between us and leaned in, and she held me the way people hold you when they're not trying to prove anything. Just present. When I pulled back, our faces were too close for pretending. I don't want to be your rebound, she said quietly. You're not. The evening light caught the side of her face. A bus rumbled past. Neither of us moved. I kissed her first. Or maybe we moved at the same time. Honestly, the logistics get fuzzy when it actually matters. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't a statement. It was slow and careful. The way you treat something you don't want to break, or something you want to understand before you claim it. Her hand found my shoulder. Mine found her face. The world narrowed pleasantly. When we broke apart, I was smiling in a way I hadn't planned. Was that impulsive? She asked. No, I said. That was a decision. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making them again. Naturally, Declan didn't consider the matter closed. The kiss was still recent when my phone began behaving like a small, frantic emergency. Texts in sequence, a voicemail, a series of Instagram DMs from an account I didn't recognize that turned out to be a secondary profile she'd made. I have no notes on that particular choice. The through line of all of it was the same. I was moving too fast. I was embarrassing myself. I was doing this for revenge. And this one she really leaned into. She was concerned about me. Concerned. Saoirse noticed my expression shift before I said anything. She's trying to manage the narrative, she said, not unkindly. It's what people do when they lose control of a situation they thought they owned. She's good at it, I admitted. Does it work on you still? I thought about it honestly. Less than it used to. I played the voicemail on speaker because Saoirse asked, and also because I'd learned that sunlight is the best disinfectant for that kind of thing. Declan's voice was measured, the tone she used when she wanted to sound like the rational one in the room. Wren, I think you need to slow down and think about what you're doing. This woman doesn't know you. I do. I know exactly how you get when you're hurt, and you're going to make a decision you regret because you want to feel better right now. That's not strength. That's avoidance. There was a long pause. Then, call me when you're ready to be reasonable. I looked at Saoirse. She knows your vulnerabilities, Saoirse said quietly. That's not the same as knowing you. That distinction mattered more than I could have anticipated. Declan did know my vulnerabilities. She'd cataloged them carefully over 2 years, and used them, I now understood, primarily as leverage. She knew I feared being too much. She knew I equated equanimity with worth. She knew that if she called something avoidance, I'd spend 3 days examining my own motives instead of hers. What would she actually tell people? Saoirse asked, if she made good on the threat. I thought about it out loud. That I'm too intense. That I need too much reassurance. That I jumped into something new too fast. None of that sounds like a secret. I paused. No, it doesn't. So she's threatening you with your own personality. When she said it that way, it sounded exactly as absurd as it was. I spent 2 years trying to make myself easier to carry, I said. You're not cargo, Saoirse said. She wasn't being clever. She meant it. That evening, I went to her apartment for the first time. A second-floor place off Rutledge with plants on every windowsill and a bookshelf organized by color, which told me something important about her. She made pasta. I set the table wrong and she fixed it without commenting. We sat across from each other and talked for 3 hours without it feeling like 3 hours. Later, on her small balcony, she stood behind me with her arms looped around mine, both of us looking at the light through the Spanish moss and the oak trees below. I'm not going to compete with her ghost, she said. but I'm also not going to pretend I don't know she's still making noise. She'll stop eventually. People like that stop when they find a new audience. She paused. Are you okay? I thought about the honest version of the answer. I'm unsettled, but I'm not lost. She turned me gently to face her. The look she gave me was patient in a way that had nothing to do with waiting. It had to do with actually seeing. You're allowed to take time with this, she said. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I kissed her. Slower this time, more settled. My hand found her waist. Hers found the back of my neck, careful and warm. We stood there in the amber light from the neighbor's porch, oak branches and Spanish moss moving gently around us. And for a few minutes, nothing outside the two of us required any attention at all. When we finally went inside, Declan's name was still in my notifications. I blocked her. Not dramatically, not as a statement. Just as the obvious next step in a sequence that had finally become clear. Saoirse was in the kitchen refilling her water glass when I did it. Done? She called over. Done, I called back. She came back to the couch and tucked herself against me with the easy confidence of someone who'd decided to be here and didn't need to keep deciding. I put my phone face down on the coffee table. For the first time in a long time, I said, the quiet feels good. She pulled the blanket over both of us. That's what happens when you stop bracing for impact. Blocking Declan, as it turned out, was not the same as being done with her. 2 days later, I was back at the restaurant. Not hiding, not passing through, just there because I wanted to be, when the air pressure changed. I didn't need to see her to know. Declan walked in like she had historical claim to the space. Dressed sharply, posture set to, in control, with the expression she used when she expected someone to be impressed before she'd earned it. Saoirse was across the room taking an order but clocked the shift in my body language before I'd moved a muscle. Declan didn't ask. She sat across from me. It's a public restaurant, she said, before I could say anything. You need to leave. I just want to talk. We talked. You walked out, because we were finished. She leaned back like she was settling in for a long stay, surveying the restaurant with the practiced indifference of someone who wants you to feel like you live in their world. This is really where you've been spending your time, she said. Less a question, more an assessment. Yes. And the server, that's the new situation. I didn't confirm or deny. Neither mattered. From across the room, Saoirse had clocked everything. She crossed to our table at a pace that was entirely professional, unhurried, deliberate. Can I help with something? She asked, steady, neutral. Declan looked her over with the precise cruelty of someone who thinks they're being subtle. I'm talking with my ex. Then I'll assume that conversation is wrapping up, Saoirse said. Declan's smile went thin. You must be the distraction. The old me would have stepped in to smooth the temperature. Would have offered something conciliatory, created enough comfort for Declan to feel she'd won the room. I felt that impulse. I just didn't act on it. I stood up. She's not a distraction, I said. She's who I want to be around. The restaurant had the quiet of people trying very hard to eat their food. Declan's composure slipped slightly. You always needed someone to validate you. That's not a relationship. That's a habit. Behind me, Saoirse's hand found the small of my back. Not possessive, not performative, just there. I needed presence, I said. You just never provided it. Silence. Good luck with this one, Declan said to Saoirse finally, her voice going pleasant in that specific way that's designed to read as generosity and function as dismissal. She's a lot. Saoirse tilted her head. I'm not interested in what's manageable. I'm interested in what's real. Declan stood. Her exit had the energy of someone trying to leave before they're dismissed. You'll figure out what this actually is, she said to me. Then she walked out. The restaurant let out a collective breath. Saoirse turned to me. "You okay?" "Yes." And I meant it. She guided me gently toward the bar. "I don't fight for position," she said quietly, "but I'm not going to watch someone try to make you feel small on my shift." She used to be better at that. "No," Saoirse said, "you used to be more available to it." That was the most important thing anyone said to me that month. Later, after the dinner rush thinned, we stood outside on the sidewalk in the warm Charleston evening. "Does she still get to you?" Saoirse asked. "A little," I said, because honesty mattered more than sounding healed. "But she doesn't get to decide anything anymore." She stepped closer. "That's the part that counts." I kissed her there, on the sidewalk on King Street, outside the restaurant where I'd eaten my birthday dinner alone 3 weeks earlier. No audience I was performing for. No point I was making. Just choosing in public, without qualification. When we pulled apart, she was smiling in the unhurried way she had. "She said I wouldn't be able to handle you. And I don't want to handle you." She brushed her thumb across my cheek. "I want to know you." I leaned my forehead against hers. Under the lights of King Street, in the city where I'd always lived and never quite landed, I understood something I hadn't articulated yet. Declan wasn't a threat anymore. She was just noise from something that had already ended. And I was, finally, learning to take up my own space without apologizing for it. I should have guessed that Saoirse had something planned. She's extraordinarily good at the neutral face. She'd been vague all week. "Trust me," and half smiles that didn't explain themselves. I was busy with a rebrand project for a local bakery client, and told myself I didn't have the bandwidth to parse her cryptic energy. What I was actually doing was finally not catastrophizing, which was its own kind of progress. On Friday, she texted, "Come to the restaurant at 8. Not formal. Just come." I rolled my eyes in the privacy of my apartment. I hate vague instructions, but I didn't make a pros and cons list. I put on the green dress. I went. Same table. Same low lighting. Same scent of rosemary in the air. But no empty chair. Saoirse was standing when I walked in her work clothes, with the expression of someone who's pulled off something they've been planning for days and is trying not to look like it. A few of her coworkers were there. The restaurant owner had come out of the kitchen. It wasn't a party. It was something smaller and more deliberate than that. Chosen people, chosen moment. "You looked like you needed a different version of that night," Saoirse said, coming to stand beside me. "So I thought we'd give you one." My throat did something involuntary. "This is a high bar you're setting," I managed. "I'm not competing with anything," she said. "I'm just building forward." The dessert arrived, different from the first time, not the pre-ordered reservation cake. Something she'd asked the kitchen to make. On the plate, in dark chocolate script. "You weren't alone. You just hadn't found us yet." I pressed my lips together to stay composed. Failed moderately. No performative birthday song. No announcement. Just people who'd been present for part of this story. And Saoirse, watching me with that careful attention she brings to everything. "You know I don't need this to stay," I said. "I know," she said. "That's not why I did it." The candle was lit. "Make a wish," she said. I looked at the flame. I thought about the Wren who sat at this same table a few weeks ago, trying to hold herself together while the chair across from her stayed empty. That woman was still me. I hadn't left her behind. But she wasn't running things anymore. "Already happened," I said. Saoirse tilted her head. "What was it?" I stood up, not to leave, to close the distance. I held her face in my hands, right there in the middle of the restaurant where I'd once been invisible. "To stay," I said. And I kissed her. Not quietly, not hidden, but not a performance either. firm and real and chosen. Her arms wrapped around my waist and held me like she'd already decided not to let go. There was no shadow of anyone else in that moment, no comparison. Just us and the soft light and the smell of rosemary and the sound of someone behind us very carefully pretending not to notice. When we separated, she was smiling the way she does when something's gone right. "Public enough?" she asked. "More than enough for me." We ate, we talked. I watched her move through that room, greeting people, laughing with the kitchen staff, touching my arm whenever she passed. And I noticed the thing I'd been unable to see with Declan. Saoirse didn't edit me out of her world. She brought me into it. When we walked out later that night, heading back toward the harbor, she said what she'd been carrying all week. "I've been thinking about the Asheville offer." My chest tightened. Familiar response. Familiar fear. "And?" She stopped walking. "I'm staying." The harbor at night, the soft slap of water. No dramatic music. Just two women standing on a sidewalk and one sentence that meant a lot of other things. "Are you sure?" I asked. "You don't have to." "Wren." Her voice was gentle but clear. "I'm not staying for you. I'm staying because this is where I want to build something, and you're part of what that looks like." I stepped closer. That's a good distinction. I thought so. I wrapped my arms around her neck and kissed her there on the battery, with the lights of the harbor behind her, and it didn't feel impulsive. It felt like something that had been assembling itself across the past few weeks. Every conversation, every small honesty, every moment where I chose to stay instead of protect. "Not impulsive?" she murmured against my mouth. "Conscious choice," I said. She laughed softly and pulled me closer. "Same." The truth, when it finished arriving, came from an unlikely direction. Not from Declan. Not from a final confrontation. From my friend Phoebe, who texted me 2 weeks after the restaurant scene with a screenshot she'd found while clearing old messages from a group chat I hadn't been part of. The screenshot was a photo. Declan, the same woman from the Instagram post, dated 4 months before my birthday. Phoebe's message. "Wait, didn't you two still celebrate Valentine's Day this year?" I'm confused about the timeline. I was too. 4 months. Valentine's Day had been 2 months before my birthday, which meant the math was, Declan had been with someone else while making plans with me. While I was looking at boutique hotels for a trip I thought we were taking in the spring. While I was defending her to Phoebe, to my sister, to anyone who'd raised an eyebrow at the fact that we didn't seem to show up in each other's lives, I sat with that for a long time. I expected it to break something. Instead, it clarified something. Saoirse was on my couch when I came back in from the balcony where I'd been processing this. She looked up from her book. That face means something happened. The timeline was longer than I thought. She closed the book, waited. 4 months, I said. Maybe more. She didn't perform shock, just absorbed it. Does it change how you feel? I sat down beside her, thought about it properly. It changes how I understand myself, I said finally. I spent the last months of it trying to be better, trying to be easier, more available, less. I paused. I thought I was the variable that needed adjusting. You weren't the variable. I know that now. She took my hand. Not to fix anything, just to be there while I held the weight of it. You weren't insufficient, she said. You were loyal to someone who was already somewhere else. Loyal. That word landed differently than I expected. Not like an indictment, like a reframe. I had been loyal. I had taken the relationship seriously because I took everything seriously. That was not a character flaw. That was who I was. Declan had used it against me because it was a lever she could reach. But the loyalty itself wasn't the problem. The problem was the person I was loyal to. I spent so long trying to be less, I said. Less emotional, less invested, less visible. How'd that work out? Badly, and with good posture. She laughed and leaned her head against my shoulder. I picked up my phone, opened Instagram, found Declan's profile. Looked at it for a long moment. Felt nothing that required action. I didn't reblock her. I didn't send a final message. I just unfollowed her, quietly and without ceremony. The way you close a tab when you realize the page isn't loading anything useful. "What did you just do?" Saoirse asked, watching me. Stopped watching something I'd already walked away from. She smiled at that. "That might be the most strategic thing you've done all month." I leaned back against her. I'm a quick learner when the data set is good. She pressed a soft kiss to the top of my head. We stayed like that for a while, not talking, not explaining anything to each other. Just two people who had chosen, repeatedly and deliberately, to be in the same place. That night, I thought about all the versions of the story I'd told myself. The one where I was too much. The one where I'd pushed her away with my intensity. The one where I was responsible for the empty chair. None of them had been true. I had not been abandoned because I was too much. I had been left behind by someone who was already leaving. And I had stayed anyway, faithful to a version of a relationship that only existed in my calendar. And on my birthday, in a restaurant on King Street, a woman with a name tag and an escaped bun and a personal policy about wine had interrupted that story. Not by rescuing me, by showing up. I turned 32, staring at a candle that wasn't mine. When I think about that now, and I do think about it, in the way you revisit things that split your life into before and after, I don't feel the embarrassment I expected to. I don't feel the phantom ache of the empty chair or the cold weight of a text message that arrived 22 minutes too late. What I feel is something closer to gratitude, and I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, it's accurate. Because that night, something that had needed to break finally did. I had spent years in a version of love that required me to constantly compress, to make myself less legible, to be patient with absence and generous with explanations, and careful never to ask for so much that I became inconvenient. I thought that was maturity. I thought the ability to accept less without complaint was a form of emotional sophistication. What it actually was, I understand now, was erosion. Slow and polite and almost invisible. Declan didn't leave me on my birthday. She formalized an exit that had been in progress for months while I was busy being loyal to something that had already moved on without me. But here's what the story isn't. It's not about the betrayal. The betrayal was just the moment the lights came on. The story is about the woman with the crooked smile and the improvised bun who decided, without being asked, that I wasn't going to sit through my own birthday invisible. Who brought wine I didn't order and stayed by a candle she hadn't lit and treated my presence like it mattered before I'd done anything to earn it. Saoirse didn't save me. I want to be clear about that. I was not a rescue situation. I was a person who had been making herself smaller for a long time, and who had, in one evening, been reminded that taking up space is not the same as being too much. She didn't tell me to forget anyone. She didn't compete with anyone. She didn't promise anything she couldn't back up. She just stayed. During the shaking aftermath of a hard conversation. During the night, I found out the timeline was worse than I thought. During the moments when I started to close up because closing up had always felt safer than risking another empty chair. And I stayed too. When it would have been easier to frame her as a rebound and protect myself with distance, I stayed. When my old patterns kicked in and said this is moving too fast, slow down, I examined them instead of obeying them. When Declan tried to reframe my choices as weakness, I let that go without an argument, because I didn't need to prove anything to someone who'd already shown me what she thought my presence was worth. Now, weeks later, I'm at my desk in my apartment in Wagner Terrace, and Saoirse is on the couch behind me, going through a culinary program application she's been putting off for 2 years. The marsh smell is coming through the open window. There are 2 coffee mugs on the table, one mine, one hers, because she started keeping a mug here, and neither of us made a formal announcement about it. That's how it tends to happen with her. No press release. Just things becoming true gradually, and then all at once. "You're doing the philosophical stare again," she says without looking up. "I'm doing strategic reflection." "Is there a deliverable?" "Possibly." She puts down the papers and comes to lean in the doorway. "You know I almost didn't come to your table that night," she says. "I almost sent someone else." "Why didn't you?" She shrugs. "You had the specific look of someone who needed to be seen and wasn't going to ask for it." I turn in my chair to look at her. "And that was enough to come over?" "That was enough to try." I think about all the ways this story could have been different. If I'd left after the water, if I'd responded to Declan's first message with the composure she expected, if I'd treated Saoirse like a distraction and protected myself with the language of being too recently hurt, I would have maintained perfect form and missed all of this. "What made you stay after we met?" I ask. "Actually stay." She considers it. "You didn't treat me like a placeholder," she says. "You treated me like a person you were choosing." "That's what you were." "I know, but not everyone makes you feel it." I get up from the desk. She doesn't move from the doorway, so I end up standing close, the way we always seem to end up. "I spent a long time trying to fit into spaces that weren't shaped like me," I say. "How's this one?" I look at her, at the mug on my table, at the application papers on my couch, at the marsh light coming through the window and the 2 of us standing in it without needing to explain the moment to each other. "Good," I say. "It fits." She smiles and kisses me softly, with the ease of someone who's been practicing and also doesn't need to practice anymore. The world doesn't require any comment. I didn't get left at dinner. I got redirected. And now, when I blow out a candle, real or imagined, I don't make a wish for someone to stay. I choose who stays, and I stay too. That's a different kind of birthday wish entirely, and it turned out to be the only one worth making.